In the late 1800s, deep in the Appalachian Mountains of Kentucky, there lived a woman known only as the Mullins Widow. Her husband had died young, leaving her with 3 sons and no money, no land, and no family to help. The mountains were cruel to widows. No man wanted to marry a woman with children. No neighbor wanted to carry her burden. Isolation carved her into silence, and poverty stripped away her dignity. As the years passed, the widow's loneliness grew unbearable. Her sons were her only company, her only strength, her only world. But in her broken mind, the lines between motherly love and hunger for companionship blurred. It began quietly, small manipulations, soft words, and the pressure of obedience. Her sons, too young to understand, grew into young men under her shadow, bound by her control. By the time they realized the horror of what she had done, it was too late. She had made them husbands instead of sons. The community whispered about strange children born from the cabin on the hill, children who did not fit in, children with illnesses no one could explain, but no one dared intervene. In that silence, the curse deepened. But here is where the story turns. One of her grandsons, tired of the shame, the whispers, and the sickness, chose to leave. He walked miles until he reached a small church in a nearby town. There he spoke his truth. He confessed the family's darkness, not to be pitied, but to be free. That boy broke the curse. He chose truth over silence, faith over fear, and healing over shame. He later built a family of his own, grounded not in sin, but in dignity and honesty. Poverty is not just the lack of money. Poverty is hunger gnawing at your stomach when you don't know when the next meal will come. Poverty is sleeping under a leaking roof, praying the rain will stop before it soaks through to your bed. Poverty is watching your children's eyes dim with hopelessness because you cannot provide what they need. And isolation is even worse. It's not just being alone, it's feeling forgotten by the world. It's the heavy silence of 4 walls closing in on you. It's the voice inside your head that grows louder when no one else is there to comment. When poverty and isolation meet, they can twist even the strongest human mind. History is filled with stories like this. Think about families trapped in mountain cabins during harsh winters, where survival was a daily battle. Think about mothers left widowed with no husband to provide and no neighbors to help. Poverty stripped them of resources, while isolation stripped them of hope. And without hope, the human mind begins to break. You see, the human heart is not designed to carry endless burdens alone. We were created for community, for encouragement, for support. When someone is cut off from all that, they begin to change. They stop thinking about tomorrow. They stop believing in dignity. They begin to act in ways they never imagined possible, just to feel alive, just to survive. This is why some people fall into desperate sins. A man who cannot feed his children may steal. A woman abandoned and forgotten may manipulate those around her just to hold on to power. A person who feels unseen may do anything, sometimes destructive things, just to feel noticed. That is what poverty and isolation can do. They bend morality, blur judgment, and weaken the soul. But here is where the lesson comes in. Poverty and isolation don't always have to destroy. Sometimes they can become the very fire that shapes a stronger spirit. Some of the greatest leaders, thinkers, and fighters for justice came out of poverty. Some of the deepest writers and visionaries were shaped by isolation. The difference is this: those who let poverty and isolation teach them rise above it, while those who let it consume them fall deeper into the pit. When you are poor, you learn to value what others waste. You learn to stretch $1. You learn resilience, grit, and resourcefulness. When you are isolated, you are forced to confront yourself, to hear your own thoughts, to discover who you truly are. Both poverty and isolation can be either prisons or teachers. Let's imagine the widow from the Mullins story. She was poor, she was alone, she had no community to guide her, no hand to help her, no voice to tell her, "Hold on, you are not alone." And because of that, her mind twisted. Loneliness turned into desperation, desperation turned into control, control turned into corruption of what was sacred. That's the dark side of poverty and isolation. But contrast her story with the grandson who escaped. He too was poor, he too was isolated, but instead of letting those forces destroy him, he turned them into fuel. Poverty made him hunger for a better life. Isolation gave him time to dream of freedom. He broke the silence by speaking his truth, and in doing so, he proved that the same conditions that broke his grandmother could be the same conditions that built him. This is the choice every human faces. Will your lack break you, or will it build you? Will your loneliness destroy you, or will it shape you? Some of the greatest men and women in history, Abraham Lincoln, who grew up in a log cabin, Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years of prison, Maya Angelou, who lived through trauma and silence, were all products of poverty and isolation. Yet instead of being twisted by it, they were strengthened by it. They let their hunger become passion. They let their silence become wisdom. You may feel poor today. Poor in money, poor in opportunities, poor in support. You may feel isolated, like nobody sees your struggle, nobody understands, nobody cares. But let me tell you this, you are not forgotten. Poverty is not the end of your story. Isolation is not your destiny. They are the fire, but you decide whether you are burned or refined. A diamond is just coal that went through pressure. Steel is just iron that survived the fire, and a strong soul is often just a broken one that refused to give up. So, the next time you see poverty, don't see shame. See the classroom where strength is born. The next time you feel isolated, don't see punishment. See the cave where destiny is written. Poverty and isolation can twist the human mind, yes, but they can also sharpen it like a blade. The choice is yours, and this is the lesson from the Mullins story. When society turns its back, when silence surrounds, when hunger and loneliness press down, you must decide, will you repeat the curse, or will you rise and break it? Because at the end of the day, poverty and isolation are not the final chapter. They are only the test before the breakthrough. There are invisible lines in life that must never be crossed, boundaries that protect trust, dignity, and the very foundation of family. These boundaries are not written in law books alone. They are written deep in the human soul. Among them, none are more important than the sacred boundaries of family. A family is meant to be a place of safety. A child should be able to run into their mother's arms without fear. A father's presence should inspire trust, not terror. Brothers and sisters should grow up as companions, not rivals for affection or control. But when those sacred boundaries are violated, the damage runs deeper than anyone can imagine. When a parent oversteps the line, when they use their children for needs they should never bear, the very fabric of family collapses. What is supposed to be a refuge becomes a prison. What is meant to be love becomes control. The home, which should be the safest place in the world, becomes the most dangerous. That is what happened in the story of the Mullins Widow. She blurred the sacred line between mother and wife, between protection and possession. By making her sons her husbands, she destroyed what family is meant to be. And in doing so, she planted confusion, shame, and brokenness into generations after her. Why does this matter for us today? Because even if we never commit such an extreme violation, the principle still applies. When family boundaries are not honored, destruction follows. Think about it. When parents try to control every decision of their grown children, they cross a boundary. When siblings betray one another with jealousy and greed, they cross a boundary. When anger and abuse replace love and patience, the sacred trust of family is shattered. Boundaries are not walls, they are lines of respect. They remind us of who we are to one another. They keep order in love. They protect children from harm, spouses from betrayal, and generations from repeating cycles of pain. The greatest tragedy of broken boundaries is that the wound is invisible at first. A child who grows up with blurred family roles often doesn't know what normal love looks like. They may struggle to build healthy relationships later. They may repeat the same mistakes, not because they want to, but because the line was erased for them before they even understood it existed. But here is the hope. Boundaries can be rebuilt. Just as a broken fence can be mended, so too can a broken family begin to heal when the truth is faced. Healing begins when someone stands up and says, enough, this ends here. In the Mullins story, it was the grandson who rose up. He saw the corruption of boundaries in his family and said, "This is not love, this is not family, I will not repeat this curse." His decision to walk away was not rebellion, it was restoration. It was drawing the line again, carving the sacred boundary back into existence, and protecting his future children from what had destroyed his past. And that's the lesson for us all. You may not come from a perfect family. In fact, most of us don't. Maybe you grew up in a home where anger was normal, where silence replaced love, where shame lived in the corners of every conversation. Maybe the boundaries that should have protected you were crossed again and again. But here's the truth, you do not have to repeat what was handed to you. You can honor the sacredness of family by choosing differently. If your father abandoned you, you can be the father who stays. If your mother manipulated you, you can be the mother who nurtures with honesty. If your siblings betrayed you, you can be the sibling who protects and uplifts. Family boundaries are not just about what we shouldn't do, they're also about what we should fiercely protect. Respect, honesty, and trust are boundaries too. When those are guarded, family becomes a source of strength instead of scars. Let us remember that children do not just learn from what we say, they learn from what we model. A boy learns how to be a man by watching how his father treats his mother. A girl learns what love should look like by watching how her parents love her and each other. If we blur those lines, we confuse them. But if we honor those lines, we equip them to walk into the world with dignity and confidence. Even faith teaches us that family is sacred, the bond of parent and child, husband and wife, brother and sister. These are not random, they are divine roles designed to protect life and pass on blessing. When they are broken, curses follow. When they are honored, blessings multiply. So ask yourself today, am I guarding the sacred boundaries of my family? Do I respect the individuality of my children, or do I smother them with control? Do I nurture love and patience in my marriage, or do I poison it with selfishness? Do I heal the wounds of the past, or do I hand them down to the next generation? Your answer will determine the story your family tells after you are gone. The Mullins widow left behind a story of broken boundaries that destroyed her family's name, but her grandson left behind a story of courage, healing, and restoration, and that is the power of choice. Family boundaries are sacred. Break them and you pass down pain. Protect them and you pass down legacy. At the end of the day, money fades, property crumbles, careers end. But family, healthy, strong, sacred family, outlives us all. Guard it, protect it, honor it, because what you protect today will protect your children tomorrow. Trauma is not just an event that happens once. It is a wound that bleeds across time. It does not always end with the person who suffers it. Too often, it travels silently into the next generation. That is why we say, trauma can repeat itself. A child who grows up in a home filled with anger may learn to use anger as their language of love. A daughter who grows up under manipulation may struggle to tell the difference between affection and control. A boy who is neglected may grow into a man who neglects his own children, not because he wants to, but because neglect was the only example given to him. This is how cycles are born. What is not healed is repeated. Look at the story of the Mullins widow. She was not born twisted. No woman wakes up one day and decides to blur the sacred role of motherhood. Somewhere in her story there was trauma, poverty, loneliness, abandonment, shame. Instead of healing, that trauma hardened her, confused her, and passed down into her sons. What she did to them was more than a violation of boundaries. It was the continuation of her own brokenness. Her sons, too, were victims, but if they had not broken free, they might have grown into men who carried that same corruption into their children's lives. Trauma is like a seed. If it is not pulled out, it will grow into the same poisonous tree again and again. And here's the dangerous truth. Many families are living in cycles of trauma without even realizing it. A family where abuse was normal may call it discipline and hand it down again. A family where silence ruled may continue to avoid honesty for generations. A family where addiction destroyed fathers may watch the sons grow into the same addictions. The cycle is powerful because it is disguised as normal. A child assumes that what they see at home is the way the world works. And so they repeat it, not out of choice, but out of familiarity. But here is the good news. Trauma can repeat itself, but it can also be stopped. Breaking the cycle begins with awareness. It begins when someone is brave enough to say, "This is not love, this is not healthy, this will not continue with me." That decision is not easy, but it is possible. Think of the grandson in the Mullins story. He grew up in a world twisted by his grandmother's choices. Shame covered his family's name. Confusion clouded his childhood, yet at some point he chose differently. He walked away, he spoke the truth, and he refused to let the curse continue. His courage stopped the repetition of trauma, and that is a lesson for all of us. You may carry scars from your childhood. You may have memories that make you flinch even today. You may carry habits you don't like but cannot explain. Anger, fear, silence, distrust. These are the echoes of trauma, but you are not doomed to pass them on. You can be the one who says, "The cycle stops here." It takes courage, it takes honesty. Sometimes it takes help from counselors, mentors, or spiritual guidance. But it is possible, and when you make that choice, you don't just free yourself. You free your children, your grandchildren, and every generation after you. Consider this. If trauma can echo forward, so can healing. If pain can pass down, so can wisdom, strength, and resilience. A man who was beaten as a child can become a father who never raises his hand, but instead raises his voice in encouragement. A woman who grew up in silence can become a mother who teaches her children to speak truth without fear. A family once known for shame can become a family known for strength. This is why your healing matters, not just for you, but for those who come after you. Sometimes people say, "I'll never be like my parents." But then one day they find themselves repeating the same mistakes. Why? Because promises alone don't break cycles. Healing does, reflection does, choosing new patterns does. If trauma can repeat itself, so can change, so can love, so can hope. The Mullins widow is remembered for repeating her pain. But her grandson is remembered for breaking it, and that is what makes the difference between curses and legacies. Let me tell you something powerful. You don't have to hand your children what was handed to you. If you are given pain, give them healing. If you are given silence, give them your voice. If you were given fear, give them courage. If you were given shame, give them dignity. Trauma can repeat itself, but so can transformation. Every family has scars. Every bloodline carries stories that are hard to tell, but you have a choice. You can let the wound stay open, bleeding into the next generation, or you can close it, clean it, and let it become a scar that tells a story of survival, not surrender. At the end of the day, trauma only wins if it keeps echoing. But the moment one person stands and says no more, the cycle is broken. That person can be you. There is a dangerous power in silence, not the silence of peace, not the silence of rest, but the silence that covers up what is wrong. The silence that knows the truth but chooses not to speak. That kind of silence does not protect people, it protects sin. All throughout history, great evils have survived not because people didn't see them, but because people saw them and stayed quiet. Neighbors heard cries from homes and closed their doors. Families noticed abuse but whispered about it instead of confronting it. Communities saw corruption but chose to turn their heads. Sin thrives in that kind of silence. The Mullins widow's story is a clear example. People in the nearby hills knew something strange was happening. They saw children who didn't look right. They heard rumors of what was going on in that cabin. But no one said a word. Some pretended not to notice. Others whispered in secret but never confronted the truth. That silence gave the widow the freedom to continue in her corruption for years. This is how silence protects sin, by keeping truth locked away, by allowing darkness to grow in secret. Think about it. When a wound is left untreated and covered up, it festers. It doesn't heal, it infects. In the same way, sin that is hidden under silence does not go away. It grows, it spreads, and it destroys. Why do people stay silent? Fear, shame, denial. A child may stay silent about abuse because they are afraid no one will believe them. A wife may stay silent about her husband's violence because she feels trapped. A community may stay silent about corruption because they fear the cost of speaking out. But here's the truth. Silence may feel safe, but it is the most dangerous choice of all. Because while silence buys comfort for today, it multiplies destruction for tomorrow. The grandson in the Mullins story broke the silence. Imagine how much courage it took for him to walk into that church, stand before strangers, and speak about the shame that had lived in his family for years. But because he spoke, healing began. Because he told the truth, the cycle ended. His voice was the weapon that destroyed the power of sin. That is why every person who has lived through trauma must understand. Silence is not protection. It is prison. Speaking the truth may hurt, but it heals. Silence may feel safe, but it kills. We must teach this lesson to the next generation. If something is wrong, hiding it does not help. If you see abuse, don't whisper, speak. If you witness injustice, don't stay neutral. Stand. If you carry shame from the past, don't bury it. Confess it, confront it, release it. Sin loses its power in the light. The moment truth is spoken, sin begins to die. Look around the world today. How many scandals came to light after years of silence? How many families lived in quiet suffering until one brave voice broke the curse? How many leaders fell because finally someone refused to stay quiet? This is the pattern. Darkness always thrives in silence, but truth always exposes it. But here is the motivation. You don't have to stay quiet anymore. Maybe you come from a family where things were hidden: alcoholism, abuse, betrayal. Everyone knew, but no one spoke, and because of that silence, the pain continued. You can be the one to break that silence. You can be the one to say, this happened, but it will not define us anymore. Speaking out doesn't just free you, it frees everyone around you. Your honesty might give courage to someone else who has been silent for years. Your voice may open the door for healing in places that have been locked up for generations. Yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, people may not want to hear it, but comfort never changes anything. Truth does. The Mullins widow used silence as her shield. The community's whispers protected her sin, but the grandson's courage to speak broke through generations of darkness. His story teaches us that the cost of silence is always greater than the cost of truth. Here's the question you must ask yourself. What am I keeping silent about that is destroying me? What secrets are suffocating my family? What truth needs to be spoken so healing can begin? Do not let silence bury your destiny. Do not let shame convince you that speaking up will destroy you. It is silence, not truth, that destroys. Think of it this way. Light only matters because it breaks darkness. Your voice is that light. The truth you carry inside is the very thing that can shatter what has been eating away at your family, your community, maybe even your own heart. Yes, silence protects sin, but truth protects souls. At the end of your life, you will not be remembered for what you hid. You will be remembered for what you healed, and healing begins the moment you open your mouth and tell the truth. So break the silence, speak the truth, expose the darkness, because as long as you are silent, sin is safe. But the moment you speak, sin begins to die and freedom begins to live. Every family carries stories they do not want the world to know. Behind closed doors, there are arguments, betrayals, secrets, and mistakes that are hidden away because of one word: shame. Shame is heavy. It tells you don't speak, don't confess, don't admit. Shame says, if people find out, you will be rejected, you will be judged, you will be destroyed. And so, families often bury their wounds under silence, carrying the weight of hidden pain instead of facing it. But here is the truth: shame does not heal anything. In fact, shame makes the wound deeper. When a family chooses shame instead of healing, the wound becomes generational. The parent's silence becomes the children's confusion. The children's confusion becomes the grandchildren's pain, until one day the family is living under a curse that nobody chose, but everybody carries. That is what happened in the story of the Mullins widow. The shame of her actions was not confronted. Her sons lived in silence, carrying the burden of what their mother had done. The neighbors whispered, but nobody spoke the truth. And in that environment of shame, the pain grew worse. But the grandson, he chose differently. Instead of letting shame bury him, he chose healing. He walked into the light, he confessed, he spoke out. And when he did, the chains of shame began to break. That is the power of choosing healing over shame. Let's be honest, every family has something to heal from. Some carry financial struggles, some carry abuse or betrayal. Some carry addiction, others carry the weight of unspoken words, fathers who never said, "I'm proud of you," or mothers who never said, "I'm sorry." These wounds are real, but they are often hidden behind smiles at family gatherings. Outwardly, everything looks fine, but inwardly, shame is eating away at the roots. The question is, will your family let shame rule, or will you choose healing? Healing requires truth. Healing requires courage. Healing requires someone to say, "Yes, this happened. Yes, it hurt, but it will not define us anymore. We will face it, we will forgive, and we will build again." Shame tells you to protect the family's reputation. Healing tells you to protect the family's future. Which one will you choose? There are families today that still live under curses passed down for generations because nobody had the courage to face the truth. A grandfather's violence turned into a father's silence, which turned into a son's anger. A grandmother's bitterness turned into a mother's coldness, which turned into a daughter's self-doubt. These patterns do not end until someone chooses healing. And here is the hope. One choice can change an entire bloodline. Maybe you are that person in your family. Maybe you are the one who feels the weight of shame pressing on your name. Maybe you look at your family history and see only pain and regret. But hear me clearly, you are not doomed to repeat it. You can choose healing. Choosing healing may mean having uncomfortable conversations. It may mean admitting the truth about what happened. It may mean forgiving people who will never apologize. It may even mean walking away from certain family members who refuse to change. Healing is not easy, but it is always worth it, because when healing begins, shame loses its grip. Imagine a family where the father who once brought anger into the home learns to bring peace. Imagine a family where a mother who carried silence finally teaches her children to speak the truth. Imagine a family where addiction was replaced with faith, where bitterness was replaced with kindness. That is what healing looks like. It is not perfection, it is transformation. The Mullins widow left her family with shame, but her grandson chose healing, and because of him, the generations after him did not have to carry the same curse. That is the legacy of choosing healing over shame. Now ask yourself, what is my family carrying that needs to be healed? What wound have we hidden for too long? What truth have we buried because of fear? Remember this, shame isolates, but healing connects. Shame destroys, but healing rebuilds. Shame says hide, but healing says rise. At the end of your life, your family will not remember you for the mistakes you covered up. They will remember you for the healing you brought. They will remember that you were the one who stopped the cycle, the one who chose courage over fear, the one who gave them freedom from the weight of shame. Every family must choose. Either we keep carrying shame until it crushes us, or we face the pain and walk into healing. One leads to curses, the other to legacy. The choice is yours. Motivation is a word people throw around easily. We hear it in speeches, see it in books, and repeat it in conversations. But what is true motivation? It is not just a temporary burst of energy. It is not just a speech that makes you feel good for a few minutes. True motivation is born from something deeper, the decision to break chains. Chains come in many forms. For some, it is the chain of poverty. For others, it is the chain of addiction. Some families are bound by chains of silence, shame, abuse, or generational curses. These chains are invisible, but they are heavy. They hold people back from freedom, from growth, from destiny. The Mullins widow's story shows us how strong chains can be. Her chain was isolation, poverty, and brokenness. Instead of breaking it, she handed it down. Her sons carried it. Her family bore its weight. For years, that chain tightened around them until it seemed unbreakable. But then came the grandson, the one who said enough. He walked out of the cabin of shame. He refused to repeat the curse. He chose to speak when others stayed silent. In doing so, he broke the chain, and that moment of breaking created true motivation, not just for him, but for everyone who came after him. That is the secret of real motivation. It doesn't come from comfort, it comes from chains. You don't become truly motivated when life is easy. You become motivated when you are tired of the chains holding you down. When you finally say, "This ends here, it will not pass to my children, I will be the one who breaks it." Think about history. The greatest leaders didn't rise from perfect lives, they rose from chains. Harriet Tubman was motivated by the chains of slavery. Nelson Mandela was motivated by the chains of oppression. Malala Yousafzai was motivated by the chains of silence placed on girls. Their strength came not from comfort, but from the decision to break chains. And that same power lives inside you. Maybe your chain is poverty. You grew up without enough, always scraping by, that can either crush you or drive you. Poverty can become the excuse for why you stay stuck, or it can become the reason you rise higher, work harder, and create opportunities for your family. Maybe your chain is addiction, alcohol, drugs, gambling, or even destructive habits of the mind. That chain may have destroyed people before you, but you can choose to be the one who breaks it. True motivation will not come from watching others live well. It will come from the moment you realize, if I don't break this, it will destroy everyone after me. Maybe your chain is silence. Your family never spoke the truth, never apologized, never dealt with the pain. You can be the one to break the silence. You can be the one who starts conversations, who opens doors, who teaches your children that honesty is healing. Chains are meant to be broken. That is where true motivation is born. But here's the thing, breaking chains is not easy. It requires courage, sacrifice, and perseverance. Chains resist being broken. They pull tighter when you try to move. That's why so many people give up and say, "This is just who we are, this is just how it is." But motivation comes when you realize chains may resist, but they are not stronger than your will. The grandson in the Mullins story didn't have money, power, or influence. But he had courage. That was enough. He understood that the pain of breaking the chain once was less than the pain of carrying it for generations. And because he chose to break it, his children were free. This is why true motivation is not selfish. It's not just about what you achieve for yourself, it's about what you set free for others. When you break a chain, you don't just change your life, you change your family's story, your community's story, maybe even the world's story. Ask yourself today, what chains am I carrying? What has held me down for too long? What do I need to break so that those who come after me can live free? You may think you're weak, you may think you're too broken. But the truth is, every chain has a breaking point, and your determination, your faith, your refusal to quit, that is the hammer that will shatter it. Once you break your chains, you will discover a fire inside you that cannot be extinguished. That fire is true motivation. It will push you through nights of doubt, through days of struggle, through mountains of obstacles, because you will not just be running toward your dream. You will be running away from the chains that once held you. The Mullins widow left a story of bondage. Her grandson left a story of freedom. Which story will you leave? True motivation is not about being inspired for a moment. It is about making a choice that changes destiny. It is about breaking the chains that have bound your family for years. It is about refusing to let your children inherit your pain. At the end of your life, you will not be remembered for the chains you wore. You will be remembered for the chains you broke. So rise, break them, because true motivation does not come from comfort. It comes from chains.